So we have been in this series, started last week. Scotty started it called hashtag wisdom. And for some of you older folks, you're not quite entirely familiar what a hashtag is, that symbol. And so what a hashtag is it's used in social media, like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And so when you hashtag something, it creates a link that then collects anything else that's been posted, like a post or a picture, a photo with that same hashtag. So it's a way of correlating and collecting information together, and some of you guys use hashtags correctly, and some people use them totally incorrectly. And so don't do that. If it's longer than 3 words, it's not a hashtag. You're just adding to your post. So just, I'm a younger guy. I'm a little more hip than some of you. A lot less hip than some of you, though. So that's how you use the hashtag. So we're calling this series hashtag wisdom because God wants His wisdom, that is found in His Word, to be in some ways hashtagable. He wants it to be searchable and knowable and accessible. And so our goal and desire in the next couple weeks is to talk about how a wise person lives. And so last week, Scotty started off with talking about the best question. He called it the best question. And the best question is simply this. It's the question, is this the wise thing to do? And it's a bigger question than, is this a good idea? Is this legal? Can I get away with this? Should I do this? Is this the wise thing for me to do? So he said, in knowing my past and looking at my present and then planning ahead for my future, is this the wise thing for me to do? And as we walk through this series, our theme verse for this comes out of Ephesians chapter 5. And it goes like this. It's Ephesians 5, verse 15 and 16 says, "Be very careful then how you live. Not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil." I love that idea. Be very careful then how you live. Not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. And so we're transitioning this week away from kind of an overview of wisdom. And so for the next 3 weeks, we're going to be looking at how a wise person lives, at what a wise person does. We're looking at the habits of wisdom. And specifically this week, we're looking at our heart, because we really believe that a wise person takes care of their heart. A wise person guards their heart. A wise person understands that the state of their heart impacts the rest of their life. And in fact, a wise person sees that what is on the inside, eventually it gets out and affects the outside. And guys, every single person in this room knows this at a deep personal level. You may not have realized that you know it, but you've experienced the truth of this. Because every single person in this room, if we're honest, you've been in a conversation. Maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a family member, parents, maybe it's your son or daughter that's getting on your nerves, and you're having this conversation. It's getting more heated and a little more energetic and a little more spicy, and you're kind of going and going and going and going, and all of a sudden you say something, you just drop this little relational bomb. And you have this moment where you step back and you're like, where did that come from? Because you don't feel that passionately about the topic that you're arguing about, Like nobody in here is passionate enough about Tupperware, to really get into it. Nobody is passionate about like the angle that the car is parked up about to really like destroy their spouse. Nobody is that passionate. You have this moment where you're like, where did that I don't really care about that much, but I'm like super steamed about it. Every single person has seen that the state of their heart eventually gets out. Every single person in here, like Scotty talked about last week, has had moments. I know I've had several moments, a handful of them at least, where I've said or done something, and in the moment I'm like, that was incredibly unwise, but it's too late now. I got to, keep going ahead. Just me? Good. All right. This will be a short sermon. You guys got it. All right. Stuff we say, the decisions we make, I really believe this, they always come from somewhere. They're rooted in our heart. And so here's the problem, guys. We as people, we don't often focus on the things of the heart when we're talking about wisdom. When we're talking about wisdom, it doesn't often lead us towards a genuine introspective look at our heart or our soul. When we're looking at wisdom, we don't look at that. And as people, guys, we all have, for the most part, the right desires. I would guess if we took a poll of the room, most people would say, yeah, I want to be wise. I want to make wise decisions in my career. I want to lead my family in a wise way. I want to love my spouse well. I want to leave a lasting legacy and impact. I want to have a good reputation, be known as a wise person. Every person in here would say that. But wisdom is more than right desire. Wisdom is so much more than right desire. Wisdom is actually living it out. It's lived out in real life. In the same way, if we asked every person in this room, do you want to be wise? Hopefully the answer would be yes. But then if we asked a follow-up question, and we asked every person in this room, are the people in this room generally wise? It probably wouldn't be as resounding of a yes. There's this disconnect there because we have the right desire, but sometimes it doesn't implant itself in real life. We want it, but that's not enough. So the journey towards wisdom, I really believe it starts with the heart. The journey towards wisdom begins with the heart. And so for the next 20 minutes or so, when I say heart, I'm not talking about the center of your romantic desires. I'm not talking about the organ in the middle of your chest that pumps blood. When I say heart, I'm talking about the core of who you are. It's the center of your ambition and your desire. It's your soul. It's the thing that motivates and you live through. So that's what I mean when I'm getting at heart. And the fact is, guys, everything in Christianity begins with the heart. Everything in our pursuit of God, in our relationship with God, everything has to start with the heart. Because if our hearts aren't engaged, then everything else is action, right? If your heart isn't engaged in your pursuit of God, then everything else is just action. It's just checklist spirituality. If you're saying to yourself, yeah, I got to get up early a few days this week and read my Bible, and probably got to read the boring parts because that'll count more, and then got to go to church, and I should probably serve too because they talk about that a lot, and then we'll be at a dinner table, and I'll probably have to share an awkward devotion with my family. I just got to do that. I got to get that done. I got to check that off the list. I can't speak for God, but nothing in that is like terribly compelling, to Jesus, I'm sure. He's like, oh, thank you so much. Wives, if your husband came home and said like, yeah, well, sometime this week we're just going to have to figure out a time to, go on a date, and I should probably clean the dishes, not because I want to, because you want me to, and then, we'll sit and talk, and I'm not really interested in what you say, but, I'm told it will help us have a good, loving marriage. No wife would be down with that. No wife was so romantic. There was no ahs, no sighs. Nobody was really motivated by that. If we're just, pursuing God without any heart involvement, with just action, it's just checklist spirituality, and it's not terribly deep, right? So we really believe if you get your heart in the right place, then right action flows from that. Because your heart in the right place, then right action, honestly, it comes naturally. So here's what God says about the heart. This morning we're going to look at two reasons, which I find to be pretty compelling reasons to take care of and monitor the state of our heart. Two pretty compelling reasons that we should be mindful of our heart health, because we say that a wise person is mindful of their heart. A wise person is mindful of their heart. And so, crazy thing, guys, every person in this room, especially parents, you are careful people. I work with a lot of your kids. I see a lot of your kids on a regular basis. Parents, you are very careful people. That is like what parents in Highlands Ranch and Littleton and Castle Rock do very well. You go to a school on a Monday morning and it's all, little helicopter moms orbiting around, especially at the start of the school year. Parents, some of you are so careful with your kids, and we really applaud that. But you shop every week at Whole Foods, and you could have retired at 60, but you'll never retire because you've spent your whole paycheck for your whole life at Whole Foods, and you're avoiding anything non-organic, and it's GMOs, which I don't even know what that means. And your kid is in the grocery store, and they're longingly looking at a Twinkie, but they'll never taste one, right? You've got your 6-year-old in therapeutic sports chiropractic medicine, for all the injuries they had. Can I just say that, when your kid is this little and they're doing mob mentality soccer, they don't need sports training yet. But we're so careful, and we want to set them up for success and do all the right things. And yet sometimes as parents, as people, we tend to overlook some of the most important things. We tend to overlook the stuff of the heart. We're careless with the stuff that impacts our soul, that impacts our kid's soul, right? That's why in Ephesians 5, our theme verse, it says, be very careful. Be very careful about how you live. Pastor Andy Stanley, one of our kind of heroes and guys we look up to a lot at Journey, says in his book, The Best Question Ever, that there are certain situations in life in which you're hyper careful. For example, if you were sitting on an airplane and you were strapped in, you had your harness on, and you were ready, and in a couple minutes, I'm going to jump out of this plane and go skydiving. Every person in the room would be hyper attentive to what's being said. You'd be double checking and triple checking, and you'd just be totally glued in. Nobody in this room would be sitting there like, yeah, I'll just figure it out, I'll just kind of play it by ear. I'll just kind of go with the vibe of what's happening in the air. And, I'll figure out which one of these is the right one to pull and the wrong one to pull, which one will save me, which one will make me self-destruct. I'll just kind of see. We'll just test it and just go. No one would say that, right? But we all live like that so frequently. Like, yeah, I would pay attention to wisdom. I would kind of like be careful with how I live. But it's so much easier to just kind of go with the flow. Be very careful about how you live because we don't live in a morally neutral culture. Ephesians 5 says the days are evil. There's always something that's trying to drag us away from wisdom, trying to pull us away from wisdom. So this morning, 2 reasons why we should really be guarding our hearts. First reason is this, because when it comes to our hearts, what's inside gets outside. What's inside gets outside. Last summer, all through the summer, we planned a variety of activities for our students, and one day we decided we'd go tubing on the Platte River, And so we started at Santa Fe, right where C-470 kind of goes over Santa Fe and the Platte there, and then we floated down to Denver Seminary. It was awesome. There's little rapids, and the sun is there, and we're floating, and go through a rapid, and you flip, and you swallow a gallon of water, and you come up, you're like, oh, that was awesome. And we get done, we had lunch in the parking lot, we drove up. It was an awesome day. We're planning that for this summer. And some friends of ours, some parents, when they found that out, they're like, you do know that there's a water treatment plant just like right upstream from where you got in, and there's some wastewater that gets emptied into the Platte. And we're like, we did not know that. And so then I'm thinking back to like, how much water indeed did I swallow? Because we're super concerned when what is outside gets inside. Right? We're a little concerned about that, but it actually works in reverse too, because what is inside of us eventually gets outside. This is what Jesus says about that idea. He says in Luke chapter 6, Jesus says this, he says, a good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart. And an evil person, they produce evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. And what you say flows from what's in your heart. Another translation says this, it says, out of the overflow of his heart, stuff happens. Out of the overflow of his heart, a man speaks. Most guys, it's out of the emptiness of his brain, a man finds himself speaking. But Jesus lays this principle out. He says, hey, what is inside of you will eventually overflow. It will eventually get out. With your heart, what's inside gets outside, right? Parents, I would guess that most of you wouldn't hand your young toddler a glass full of red wine and just have them, go loose in your light-colored living room. Most of you probably wouldn't do that. Parents, if you're giving your little kid a glass of wine anyways, it's like a horrible parenting move. But the reason that you wouldn't do that is you would know that what is inside of that cup would eventually end up outside. The contents would be everywhere. And our hearts are the same way. No matter what we fill them up with, it will eventually spill out. Our hearts leak. Our hearts aren't sippy cups, right? Sippy cups are a great invention because they can't be spilled, or it's very, very difficult. And our hearts, they're not sippy cups. What is inside of our heart will eventually get outside. Jesus says this. He says, okay, so a good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart, but the evil person, they do the exact opposite of that. And so knowing that what is inside gets outside causes us to monitor the outflow of our heart. Causes us to look at, okay, so what is coming out of my life? So when the outflow starts looking ugly, when it's harsh words or anger or manipulation or lust, guys, that should be a flare. That should be a warning flag to us to say, okay, so look very carefully at the inward state. It's symptoms of a deeper problem. And Jesus says this. He says, watch it because it impacts your life. This is the way I see the order, is that a good heart produces a good person who produces good things. And in our culture, so often, we overlook the heart. We say, yeah, well, they make bad decisions every week, and they blow up their life every 6 to 8 months, and they just make horrible decisions all the time, but they're really a good person. They just have a good heart. And I think Jesus would say, really? Like, where is the evidence of that? What is inside of you defines your life, and then what your life is made of, flows out onto everybody else. First reason we should be really careful with our heart is because what is inside of our heart gets outside. And that second part, the state of your heart defines your life. That leads us to that second point. And that's this: what's inside is who you really are. What's inside of your heart, inside of your soul is who you really are. It's your real identity. Jesus, I really think would say that the inside state of you is more important than the outside. So a little mini story here. In Mark chapter 2, there is this paralyzed man who is brought to Jesus. And Jesus is famous at this point really early on. And he's operating like a sold-out show in this person's house. It's packed. And they're doing a little house show. And Jesus Unplugged, something like that. And everybody is there. It's packed out. There's not room for one more person. And so these 4 guys get together, and they decide, hey, we got to get our friend to Jesus, which is like an amazing example for every person in this room when you care about your friends in that way. But anyways, they get together like, we're going to get our paralyzed friend to Jesus. So they pick up their mat, and they get there, and they get to the house, and it's packed out. There's no way they can get their friend to Jesus. The dude's probably pretty dejected. He's like, all right, we'll just try another day. But the friends are unconvinced, like, no, we're doing this. And so they start lifting their friend up on the roof. And he's paralyzed, so there's like nothing he can do about it. But if 4 of your friends, guys, tried to lift you on a roof, you would have some serious objections. And so he's probably freaking out, and they get him up on the roof. And then they start digging through this stranger's roof. Right? It's as if, as I'm teaching this morning, ceiling tiles and mortar and whatever, roofs are made of comes raining down. It's causing a distraction, right? It would be a distracting thing for all of us. Jesus is probably like, what is going on? And, bits and pieces are raining down. And they lower their friend down in front of Jesus. And Jesus is so impressed with this act of faith, with this almost reckless commitment to getting their friend in front of him, that he looks at this young paralyzed man and he says, your sins are forgiven. And the religious leaders who are there, they're like incensed, and everyone who's there is probably a little awkward, like, Jesus, the guy can't walk. They're probably like, did you not notice he's totally paralyzed? That's why he's here. But Jesus sees that what is going on inside of someone is so much more important than anything that's happening to their body. To kind of one-up and to prove who he is, he ends up healing the man anyways. But Jesus recognizes that the inside state of you is so much more important than anything that's going on the outside. And Jesus, I really think, would say, hey, the state of your heart is what really matters. The state of your heart is the bottom line. For those of you who don't know me and my wife's story, Wendy, we met in high school. We met the first day of freshman year. I was a new kid at a new school, and she gave me the tour. And I thought to myself, dang, she's fine. Never, ever did I think I would marry her because she was way out of my league, and I was skinny and awkward, and I still am. So fast forward a few years, and it's senior year, and we've kind of developed this friendship, and she was really pursuing me hard and loving me hard, and it's the opposite of that. So I pursued her hard all year and tried to make it abundantly clear how I felt about her. And so it culminated in one of the culminating events of high school, the senior prom. And I asked her to the senior prom. There's actually behind me. There's a little picture of us on senior prom night. I know. I peaked early, so a little ski jump and all that. So that's us. Take that down. No focus. So this is what happens, guys. Senior prom is a little bit, if I'm going to be honest, it's a disaster. We get lost. We're late. Our car breaks down. We miss half the dance. I forget the tickets. I have an allergic reaction. All sorts of stuff. I get to after prom, and I pull out my pants, from the bag that my mom had packed, and they're wet, and the dryer is broken. We get to after prom, and I fall down. I rip my pants roller skating. The whole butt is exposed, and it's just kind of this nightmare. Her friend loses her keys and has to drive back to us, the house with us, and it's really awkward, So this is the end of the night, and I'm dropping her off. We've hung out friends all night. I'm dropping her off. It's 10 in the morning, and I walk her to her, park my little 92 Honda Accord, which was the nice car in the Mengel family. That was like the date mobile, which is sad, all right? But this is what happens next, guys. This is unbelievable. This is the bottom line of prom. This is what I think back of. This is what happened. We pop the back trunk, and it goes like that, and I'm a man. everything I need for survival is currently on my person, right? I've never been a woman, and I have very little understanding of how they work, especially at 16, right? So I pop the trunk, and we go around back, and I think Wendy has her little dress bag that her prom dress is in. I was like, I'm gonna be chivalrous. I'm gonna carry her stuff. Maybe I'll give her a smooch on the door, on the doorstep. Who knows? It's a wide world of opportunity. And so I reached in, I grabbed the dress bag, and again, I'm a man. I think you have a maximum of one bag, and I think my work here is done, trunk. And I turn around, and I throw my hand up on the trunk, and I just slam it down. Because when you shut a trunk, you just shut it, right? So trunk gets about halfway down, boonk, and it bumps back up into my hand. And I think, oh, nothing good can come of this. And I turn around, and I realize what has happened is, as I've grabbed the bag and turned around and shut the door, the trunk, my wife, or not then wife, Wendy, has reached in to grab her purse, and the trunk catches her right in the forehead. And so I turn around, and there's this big red line. She's got tears in her eyes, and I'm like, I was like, no, no. And I realized, oh my gosh, I shut your head in the trunk. She's like, no, it's okay, it didn't hurt. She's trying not to cry. I swear to you, 3 seconds later, Wendy's mom, Lonnie, my mother-in-law now, opens the door. Sweetest person in the whole world. She opens the door. She's like, guys, how was prom? And it's like, see you, Wendy. That was how prom ended. And so when people ask the next day or the next week or, now a decade and a half later or whatever, hey, how was prom? I'm like, it was great, but it was great right up until I shut her head in the trunk. That is the bottom line. That's pretty much what happened, right? For Jesus, so the point of that whole story is that that's what matters. That's the bottom line. The state of your heart is bring it back, people. It's about to get serious. All right? Y'all are going to stop laughing in a second. Matthew 23, Jesus is talking about this idea. He says this. He says, okay, so what sorrow... It's going to get real. What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees? Pharisees, teachers of the law, are the religious people. They're the pastors. He says, hypocrites. For you're so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you're filthy, full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first wash the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will become clean too. So Jesus gives a first example. He's like, man, you religious people, you're so concerned with what other people think. When you're outside, your exterior looks fine, but the inside is a mess. It's like a cup. And then he gives another more extreme, more awkward example. He says, what sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites, for you're like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but filled on the inside with dead people's bones and all sorts of impurity. Outwardly, you look like religious people, but inwardly, your hearts are filled with hypocrisy and lawlessness. So Jesus gives two examples that are aimed at the same thing. He says, your outside looks great and your inside is a mess. And this is the cornerstone of why Jesus and the religious leaders of his day butt heads so frequently. Because the religious system that he was a part of was convinced in large part that I have to look good and outward conformity is what matters. And Jesus says that does not matter if what is going on inside flies in the face of that. It does not matter how good you look if you're a mess inside. Folks, if you came over to dinner at a friend's house and they're serving up, casserole or salad or goulash or whatever is, on the menu for tonight, and they slide your plate in front of you, and you're like, man, that meal looks delightful, but it is so clear that the plate hasn't been cleaned. I can tell what they had the past week. I really don't know what you would do next. I don't know what you would do next, but there would be this huge hesitation in your heart to actually eat off of that plate because you're like, this is a mess. This is a problem. What is happening here? I thought we were friends. Do you hate me? Jesus is saying, hey guys, when you're so focused on the outside but you neglect the inside, it is a huge, monumental problem. And Jesus would say, does the outside really even matter then? I don't think it does. What's on the inside matters. What is unseen is important. Scotty was teaching our team a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about the importance of foundation in your life. And as people, we don't focus on foundation a lot. Foundation is not often seen. It's not sexy. It's not that. Most of you, if you're a homeowner, when you went looking for a house, the realtor is showing you around, and he goes, look at the yard, look at the master bedroom, look at how much light comes in, great sun exposure. None of you are like, okay, enough about that. Let's go to the basement. Let's get down into the crawl space. Let's look around. Let's kind of dig around into the bushes and look at that foundation. Nobody does that. We don't focus on the foundation of a house. We don't focus on the foundation of our life. But Jesus says it's so important because it's who you really are. Your heart is who you really are. And a lot of Christians these days, unfortunately, they look great on the outside, but the inside is a mess. Jesus would say, you look great on the outside, but you're dying and rotting on the inside. So the heart is so important. As people, we safeguard and protect important things. So wrapping up, I'm going to give us 2 ways, kind of action steps, takeaways on how we guard our heart and how we protect what's inside. And we do this in 2 ways. We filter and we fill. We filter and we fill. So first thing, if you want to guard your heart, the best way to do that, here's why so many people want to be wise but never actually become it, is because we overlook the stuff that impacts the state of our heart. And in light of that, I think we filter out stuff that doesn't belong there. Proverbs 4:23, probably the most famous verse along these lines, says this. It says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Guard your heart. I love that idea. No person in this room would walk into Starbucks and drop their social security card and then walk back out. Announce to Starbucks or whatever your coffee shop of choice is, here's my banking checking account routing number. I'm just going to leave that there. I've created this blank check. And I'm just going to leave that there. Just hope that somebody takes care of that. Nobody would do that. Nobody would take their little toddler and walk into the middle of a mall and drop them and say, good luck. Go Moses in the basket with it. Nobody would do that. We're like, no, I'm going to guard you. I'm going to protect you. We guard and protect what's important. And I think our heart is so very important. Proverbs 4:23, above all else. Guard your heart because it determines the state of your life. So we filter out stuff that does not belong in our hearts. We police our hearts. We get involved in our own soul. 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5, Paul says it like this. He says, we destroy arguments. We destroy every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God. And here's the really important part. And we take every thought captive to obey Christ. I love that idea. We take every thought captive. Guys, your mind and heart and soul, it's not an open field. It's not open pasture where anything can roam. It's meant to be guarded and to be safeguarded and to be corralled and to be managed. So I put a post out on Facebook this week, and I said, hey, I'm needing a lasso. Who has a lasso? And within 7 minutes, I had a text message from a good friend saying, I have a lasso. A lot of you wrote on my wall offering lasso. A lot of closet lasso people at Journey, which I really appreciate. And so late last night, we got a hold of this lasso finally, and I started lasso practice. And so, as happens in some Saturday nights, we turn on music, and Wendy wanted to have a dance party, a 2-person dance party. And so my wife, Wendy, is kind of like dancing around in the living room, and I'm, spinning this lasso, and I start looking at her, and I'm like moving target. This is awesome. And she's in the moment. She's getting. My wife is an amazing dancer. She's going to be a Zumba instructor sometime if this nursing thing doesn't pay out. But and so I'm trying to lasso, and I don't want to do it now because I won't be able to get it. But I'm a really good lassoer, I discovered, because first try, as Wendy's kind of like dancing, she's kind of going around the couch in the middle of our living room. She's kind of dancing around, and I'm like, oh, I got you. And I indeed did lasso her. Right around the neck. And so she stopped pretty suddenly, and that was the end of the lasso practice. So, dangerous little guy. But the idea behind this is we do that. We should be lassoing and corralling and doing all that other cowboy-related imagery with our minds and with our hearts. We should filter out and take thoughts captive that don't belong there. And so often we think about this idea in terms of impure thoughts. We think of lust or greed or envy. But I think this is so much a bigger idea that Paul is getting at than that. I think God is encouraging us to put ourselves and ultimately him in the captain chair and in the director's seat of our heart and of our mind. So when thoughts of worthlessness come in, we lasso them and we get rid of them. When thoughts of anger and unforgiveness and bitterness come in, we reject those, we tear those down. When spiritual pride and arrogance comes slithering in, we throw it back out. When anything that comes in that doesn't line up with the character of God and his word, who he's created us to be, comes in, we get rid of it. We take every thought captive. So with this, it's the what and the who. So what are you putting into your life? What is making its way into your life? The way we say this with our students is that humans are pretty effective computers. Input really strongly affects output. We say this, we say junk in, junk out. What are you putting into your life? Second question with that is, who is speaking into your life? Who is informing your heart? Is there somebody or a relationship that is speaking into you that's saying, this is who you are, this is your identity, that's pouring stuff into your heart that just shouldn't be? And when that's the case, we just filter that stuff out. But we don't stop there, we also fill our heart. So what are we filling our hearts with? There's a great list that's given us in Philippians 4:8 for this idea. It says this. It says, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. That's a great list as we're thinking as followers of Jesus. Okay, what do I want to fill my life with? What do I want to be defined by? What do I want to have inside of me? Here's my list. And if it doesn't meet that list, if it doesn't meet those requirements, it doesn't belong in my life. And it's the what and the who. So what am I putting into my life? Is what I'm ingesting with my media choices, with the way I spend my time, with what I do with my hobbies, is what I'm ingesting and putting into my heart, is that building me up? And it's also the who. Are the people I'm around, are they encouraging me? Are they building me up? Are they making me more Christ-like? Do I walk away a better person? That's one of the reasons we believe so strongly in groups at Journey. That's one of the reasons we encourage you guys and try to do ourselves every week, getting in the same room, in the same house with people who believe the same thing. And sometimes it's really intense and it's like life-changing and it's beautiful and people cry. And sometimes it's the wipeout run yesterday. So most of our folks in our community group, and actually all those folks lead with us in our student ministry and Journey students, yesterday morning we got up early and we did the wipeout run. We also, all of the men sent our wives to Walmart for outfits, and they came home with women's workout shorts and women's workout tops. We had come to grips with it at that point, but we were not that excited. So, the 8 of us, we did this wipeout run. It was amazing. There was like, swing stuff and slides and a little running in between. It was awesome. And that's the reason, guys, we believe in groups, is because life is just better together. We've learned that so much in the last month, is that life is just better together. And every single person in here needs people who can challenge, encourage them, who can be friends with them. Every one of us needs that person who's speaking in and filling up our heart. So wrapping up right now in conclusion, and as I say this, the band's going to come up, and we're going to sing one last song. We'll have communion on either side of the stage that you're welcome to partake in. But Scotty shared this verse yesterday, and I love this verse. It's from James 1. It says this, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. And God gives generously to all without finding fault. And it will be given to you. If you lack wisdom, ask God, because God gives generously and he doesn't find fault. My example for God finding fault is this. He doesn't come to you and say, well, why don't you have wisdom? After every retreat we do with our students, we're left with this bag of leftovers and lost and found. And that most recently, after our fall retreat last year, it's a one-night retreat. It's about 18 hours. We found a little pair of little middle school boy jeans. If you've ever had a middle school boy in your house, you know that they only bring one set of pants to retreat, right? There's one shirt, one set of pants. And so as we're looking at the lost and found, we're then looking around the group like, who doesn't have their pants? And we're waiting for some little middle school boy to come up like, I lost my pants, And our response to that would have been like, how? How did you lose your pants? Where are your pants? God does not do that as it comes to wisdom. He's not coming to us and saying, why did you do that, make that decision? Why are you not wise? Why are you asking me for this? He's saying, no, I want you to have wisdom. If any of us lacks wisdom, we should ask God. And I want to ask the what if question. What if we were a church that every morning, or maybe every afternoon and evening, as often as we needed, we got down on our knees and our faces in front of God and we said, God, would you give us wisdom? God, would you give us wisdom? Would you help us to make wise decisions? Would you protect our hearts and help us to make the wise decisions to do that? To have wise hearts. What if our church was known as a community of people who said every morning, God, would you give us wisdom? And then live that out? What if?